96.3 WHUR and HUR Voices, Sirius XM, Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. Your questions or comments toll free at 855-288-4876. Now, Insight.
Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM, Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. Are we spending way too much time with technology? Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, even texting and email, laptops, iPads, and the like. Is it an addiction, or is it just the way we live today? Well, tomorrow begins the National Day of Unplugging, a day to tune out technology and reconnect with the human race. Joining me to talk about this are Miko Marquette Whitlock, founder and CEO of Mindful Techie, and clinical psychologist Dr. Nicole Cutts. Lines are open at 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. Yes, we're going to ask you to tweet us using the hashtag WHURFM, and we're asking, can you unplug for a day or two or more, or is it just too tough? Thank you both for coming in and sharing with us. Dr. Cutts, good to hear from you again. And Miko, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Harold.
Okay, so first of all, let's talk about this National Unplugging Day. Miko, what's behind that?
Well, it's essentially it's a 24-hour detox. So we're used to cleanses or, doing a fast. So this is the same thing that we're doing, but we're just unplugging from our technology. And it's a awareness day that was created about 9 years ago by a group of folks that just wanted to draw attention to the fact that we are increasingly connected to our devices. And for a lot of folks, it's getting to the point where it's getting in the way of their well-being and getting in the way of them actually being able to have stable relationships with people that are close to them. So this is really about raising awareness about this issue to have conversations just like the one we're having right now.
But wait a minute. How can this get in the way of stable relationships if everyone is doing it? Isn't this just another way to communicate and everybody kind of understands that this is just the way things are?
Well, it's about finding the balance, right? So technology can be an asset. It can add value to our lives. But what we're talking about is raising our awareness about the ways in which it can get in the way, in the ways in which it can actually take away. So Facebook is not bad. Social media is not bad. Your phone and texting, that's not bad. Those are ways that we're communicating, and it in many ways have made the world smaller. But if we're doing it too much, or if it's getting in the way of us actually getting our work done, if it's getting in the way of us actually living a life outside of just being connected to our screens, then that might be a challenge, might be a problem for us.
Often, Dr. Cutts, we hear about addiction when we're talking about technology. But for most people, when you think addiction, you think drugs, you think alcohol, you think cigarettes and the like, even gambling. How does that apply to this, if at all?
Well, you can have addictions to devices. There are also, you can have addictions to gaming, playing games on your phones and your technology. And there are some people, an addiction is anything that interferes with your life and your relationships. So work, school, or your relationships. Anything that you cannot just easily put down. So definitely, I think a lot of us, if we don't have diagnosable addictions, we do at least have an addiction in a colloquial sense to our devices, yes.
Well, you know that, and you and I have had this conversation before, a lot of women out there get mad at guys because all they do is text. Yeah. Is that an addiction, or is that just the modern social norm where nobody talks anymore?
Well, I think we have to make smart choices. Different devices are good for different types of communication. For example, if you are having a heated conversation or an emotional conversation or an intimate conversation, then you should pick up the phone and have that conversation. A lot of times people say things via text, email, all those things that they wouldn't say face-to-face. And for me, a good rule of thumb is if you wouldn't say it face-to-face, then don't text it. Sometimes people are scared, they're intimidated to have certain conversations, so they rely on texting. And that's really a cop-out, and it doesn't help to build intimacy in your relationships.
Rule of thumb, well, that's what you use when you text, your thumb. So, no pun
Didn't think about that.
Yeah, well, that's what I do. 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. We're talking about a National Day of Unplugging. Tuning out your technology, cutting it off for a day or two, and reconnecting to the human race. Can you do that? If you think it's difficult, why do you think it's difficult? I'd like to hear from you. Lines are open at 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. Talk to me, Miko, about, in your line of work, how you know when this is problematic.
Well, when it comes to technology, I work with professionals primarily in the professional capacity, and in that particular instance, it shows up as being all over the place, having a lack of clear priorities, and you have folks that, for example, might spend the vast majority of their workday answering emails, trying to clear out their inbox, thinking that they've actually done something productive, when all they've done is actually gotten in the way of the most important things. And so I encourage people to start with getting back to what is your vision, what is your intention for the work that you're doing, how is it that you want to advance the mission of your organization, how is it that you want to serve your clients or your colleagues, and then set priorities according to that. And then when you're in your email, when you're on social media and you get distracted, you can ask yourself, okay, well, is my use right now connected to advancement of the priorities of my organization? Is it in advancing the work that I'm doing, or is this something that I'm doing to procrastinate, something that's actually getting in the way of me being actual productive?
Are there some people that it probably would be best if they did not unplug because of the nature of their jobs or the nature of their lifestyle?
Yeah, so that's the case. And so when it comes specifically about this date, so March 9th through the 10th, we're talking about this 24-hour period from Friday at sunset through Saturday at sunset. We're asking people to do what you can, right? So maybe you can't go the whole 24-hour period. Maybe that's not realistic for you based on the way your life is set up. But an hour or two or more, figuring out what works for you. And at the end of the day, this is really about taking time to reflect, again, on how is technology adding value to your life? How is it not? And then figure out how you actually bridge that gap.
Dr. Cutts, here's the thing, and you and I are old enough to remember when, before smartphones, when, growing up, there was only one phone line.
I remember too.
Right, okay. Oh, there you go. See? But then, when the kids, got a little older, myself included, then parents, after much discussion, got a second phone line. And then what happened? We were on the phone all the time, and our parents were telling us, get off the phone, and come and reconnect with the family. Isn't that the same thing today?
Yeah, anytime that you are losing connection, and I love what Miko said in the mission of his organization, it's about mindfulness. It's about making choices. So anytime that you are using the phone to separate yourself from people, or when you have to have balance, so, I know sometimes I'm with my nephew and now my older niece, and they've got their faces down, in the phone. And there is something unique or special about connecting face-to-face without the distractions of the devices. So, yeah, I think it's a lot the same. I mean, in my house, we grew up with two lines all the time, but we also had some restrictions. There were some telephone hours, so you couldn't just be on the phone.
Well, the restrictions in the household I grew up came after my sister and I began to separate from the rest of the family, because we were talking to friends on the phone,
right,
late at night. So yeah, I get it. 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. We're talking about tuning out your technology and reconnecting to the human race. Of course, tomorrow is the National Day of Unplugging. Can you do it? Do you think it's possible? And why or why not? Let's talk to Dan, calling from D.C. Dan, thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
Hey, no problem. I just wanted to make a comment.
Sure.
With this National Day of Unplugging, I could say yeah, I could probably do it for 24 hours, but if you asked me to do it for more than that, I don't think I'd be able to, because I feel like I'm addicted to technology.
Why do you say that you feel that you're addicted, Dan?
Because case proven. You mentioned earlier, and I'm probably as old as you are, that when it came to the telephone lines, you had 2 telephone lines. Yeah, I was told, like, okay, you need to reconnect, get off the phone. So it's the same thing now as an older adult with technology. I constantly have my phone on me. Heck, right now I'm talking to you guys, so I have to be on the phone.
Right.
So and I'm married, and my wife and I go through the same thing. We're constantly on our phones. We don't fully have each other's attention, and we try to implement things with our own children about, like, at least having a night or two of putting your phones down, having a nice meal together, so that way we can what's the word I'm looking for? I guess
reconnect.
Reconnect, exactly.
Okay. Well, Dan, thank you so much. I appreciate your phone call, and that brings another point that I want to get to after the break, because I think that the Dans of the world and spouses are maybe feeling the pinch of this issue. It's not just the workplace, it is at home. We're going to talk about that. We are talking about the National Day of Unplugging. Can you tune out your technology, put your devices down, and reconnect with the real world? Lines are open at 202 319-7810, 202-319-7810. Please give us a call even after 7:30. We will be taking your phone calls, and keep trying if you have difficulty getting through. The Daily Drum will continue on Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. Jeff Brown is next with the original Quiet Storm on 96.3 WHUR. We'll be back in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM Channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. I need to update you on the latest breaking news coming from the White House today. North Korea's leader has sent an invitation to President Trump to meet over nuclear power. We are now, and weapons, and we are now getting information that is suggesting that the president has agreed to meet with North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un, by the end of May. This information, again, coming from a South Korean delegation that visited Washington today. Again, we're hearing that President Trump has agreed to meet with North Korea's leader by the end of May over nuclear weapons. Back to our issue now regarding unplugging. And that's a prime example. In the news business, I don't feel that I can, because I know I need to be connected. Mm-hmm. That is part of the job for those of us in this business, even when we're on vacation. Although much less so, we are still connected, if not for the job, because we are always curious about what is going on in the world, and newspapers, as we have seen, just don't do the trick. So, I think that, but in the case of our last caller, Miko, I cannot imagine, unless Dan and his wife agree to unplug after synchronizing their watches, unplug at the same time for the same amount of time, because if he goes to work and she goes to work and he doesn't talk to her all day, I can only imagine, that they would go through withdrawal, unlike our parents, who, when they went to work in the mornings, they didn't talk to each other all day until they got home at night, unless, of course, they picked up the phone and called to speak to each other during the day. When you're talking to businesses, for example, how do they receive, that kind of unplugging practice that you suggest?
Yeah, so it's, for the most part, it's received enthusiastically. And what we're talking about, so we're talking about the National Day of Unplugging, but I want to separate that from the balance that we're talking about just in our everyday
Sure.
lives, right? So in your example around, being in the news business, having to sort of be in the know constantly, I imagine that you need to sleep, right? You're human. You need to eat, right? I'm assuming you need to do that.
True.
You need to go to the bathroom. I'm assuming you need to do that too.
That's true.
So my point is that we can set aside time, for example, before bed and first thing in the morning where we're not connected. And Dr. Cutts can probably speak to this more, but our brains need time to rest and to recover. Yeah. And if you are constantly connected as a sponge, absorbing what the world is giving you, at some point you're going to burn out. And what I tell the folks that I'm working with is that you can choose to proactively set aside time to disconnect and to unplug, or you can let the universe do it for you, right? So people get sick, people burn out, people have all sorts of challenges that cause them to really take time to step back. So I don't know, Dr. Cutts, you want to dive in there and talk about that piece?
Yeah, I want to talk about the neurobiology involved in that. If our brain synapses are constantly firing, that's going to lead to dulling of our ability to think clearly, to be creative, and to be mindfully in the moment, which is what Nico's organization is about. So yeah, your brain definitely needs that rest. It needs that rest to recharge and to ultimately be more effective. And the other problem with the phones, and you mentioned that breaking news, because I have the news alerts on my phone also, is that it's constantly sending this little rush of adrenaline through our systems connected to the fight or flight syndrome. The text comes in, the email comes in. That also causes stress on our bodies and burns out our motors. So yeah, it's definitely a healthy thing to take breaks from so much stimulation.
202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. Let's talk to Sarhang, I believe it is. Is that correct, Sarhang?
Yes, that's true.
Yes, go ahead. What's on your mind?
What is in my mind is just suggestion. In fact, I wanted to say two things. First, I'd like to suggest, if possible, to keep the electronic device just for the telephone calls and get rid of all other apps. What I mean is, you use your phone just for phone reason, not for any other issue. Because in that case, at least you're going to be able to keep connected to someone whom you want to. Because the problem with this smartphone is not the phone itself; it's all the apps which existed within the phone, which connects you to the social media, to the other apps. So this is my suggestion.
Interesting. Your thoughts about that, Nico?
Yeah, so Sarhang brings up a couple of interesting points. So the first is, it's not by accident that we're seeing an increase of what people are calling addiction to the screens, right? So you have companies like Facebook and Google that their bottom line is tied to how much time we're spending on our phone scrolling through a news feed or being sort of attracted to the features, so we stand in line for the next new device that comes out. So that's one part of the issue here. The other part of it is, we, I think, have an epidemic of what I call intention deficit disorder.
What do you mean by that?
Well, where we lack clear intention about what it is that we're doing in a particular moment. So if you're at work and you sort of aimlessly sort of checking your email or checking Facebook without any idea about what are your goals for the day, what it is that you're looking to achieve, that is a lack of intention. And I think if we were to go back to what we're talking about with this National Day of Unplugging, the real point is, no matter how much time you spend unplugging, to actually take the time to sit down to figure out at the end of your life, what will have mattered? What's your legacy going to be? And the way that you're using your devices and other technology, how is that helping you to advance that particular goal in mind? So that's really what this is about. When we talk about reconnecting, we're talking about identifying what's really important and aligning our technology use with that.
What about relationships, Dr. Cutts? How can unplugging really improve relationships, particularly when you have an entire generation or two generations of people that are used to connecting electronically instead of face-to-face, heart-to-heart, so to speak?
Well, first of all, I really like what Miko said about intention deficit disorder. And I think the same goes for relationships. You want to think about, what is my intention? Where am I trying to be right now? One of the things that we talk about in couples therapy is not having any exits from the relationship. If you want to have a good, strong relationship, built on intimacy and trust, then you want to close all of the exits. And our cell phones and all of our devices can definitely be an exit. So are other addictions, affairs, all of those are exits. So, that is sometimes, for some people, that might be a small door, but it's still an exit. So to have a stronger relationship, you want to keep the energy and the attention between you. That doesn't mean that you all can't ever be on your phones together in the same room, but you can set some parameters. You can say, it's dinner time, or we're going out to dinner, or, whatever, or we're having a conversation. Let's put our phones away.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I think to pick up on that and to go back to Sarhang's point, there are two things that I recommend for tablets and phones in particular. So the first is, you can have multiple screens for apps. So what I recommend is on your home screen, keep the basic things that you need. Keep the GPS, keep the note-taking, keep those things on your home screen, and put the other things like the social media, the news, all of those things on a separate screen. That's the first tip. The second is you actually have control over the notifications, right? So they are set by default to push notifications to you, going back to what Dr. Cutts was saying about like that rush we feel when we get an alert and we want to check it and we want to feel some sense of accomplishment. You can actually turn those off so that you're only getting the alerts when you choose to actually engage with the application. So if you want to be more mindful about how you're engaging with those, those are two things you can do right away.
202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. We're talking about unplugging our electronic devices, at least for a time, a day or so, even a few hours, and reconnecting face-to-face, heart-to-heart with the human race. Let's go to Nettie. Nettie, calling from D.C. Thanks for calling. What's on your mind?
Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to note that I had a situation where I got my apartment, and I decided to buy everything new.
Okay.
From the dishes, from the bedroom, the living room, everything new. And I forgot to buy a microwave.
Okay.
Now, I'm thinking, forgetting to buy a microwave, I went berserk.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, if everything shut down, if technology shut down, what would we do? So we have to take the time out every once in a while to disconnect from these things. So I have to go back the modern way and cook on the stove and use the oven to heat things up.
Okay.
But it can be good in a way, because that old saying, where are you? Do you know where your children are?
And you know what, Nettie? That's the next point that I was going to bring up, and you bring up that and another important issue. So thank you for your phone call. Let's first of all let's briefly talk about how are your cooking skills, Dr. Cutts?
My cooking skills are off the chain.
Okay, well and so are mine, but
we might have to go head to head then.
There you go. And I think Nettie makes a really good point, whether it's smartphones or other electronics. I think that is an opportunity for us to develop some basic life skills. Mm-hmm. But I think the other piece that she mentions, and this has to do, again, with modern technology, I'm sure a lot of parents would say, disconnect for a day, and that means I may not know what happens to my child if I decide to disconnect, for a day. And this is, I'm using this in the absolute example.
Yeah. So go ahead, Dr. Cutts.
For Miko? Okay. What I was, our parents couldn't call us on the cell phone. They had to call our friends' houses, or they had to call school if they really needed us. So I think it's an opportunity to see that, the world will not fall apart if you can't immediately reach your child, because for And even for years before that, we didn't even have landlines.
Well, yeah, but that meant that your children stayed in close proximity to the house also. And
well, not always. I mean, when they're traveling, like back in the day when I used to travel, I had to get tokens and what have you to try to be in touch with my parents because we didn't have cell phones.
Well, I'm talking about smaller children.
Yeah.
You were in close, except for you. I mean, you're a different kind of animal, Dr. Cutts. As always, we know that.
I was in the woods.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Your mother had to send a carrier pigeon. But all jokes aside, I think that's one concern about being able to stay in contact with your children if you decide to unplug. I'm sure the thought terrifies some parents.
Yeah, and going back to what I was saying earlier, this isn't about being absolutist. So you have to figure out practically like what works for you and for your lifestyle. At the end of the day, this is really about getting folks and their families to really just sit down to reflect on the role that technology is playing in their lives and the role, is it enhancing it, and how you can play those things up. If it's not, if it's distracting, if it's impacting the relationship, is it impacting the family dynamic, and then what you can do to address those things. So this is to have the conversation that we're having right now.
Before I go to a break, because I know we're going to lose you, Dr. Cutts, what are your best suggestions for detoxing from technology if there really is an addiction problem?
There really is an addiction problem. You might want to get some outside help, but before you know whether or not you have an addiction problem, try setting some boundaries on your time with your devices. Like Miko's talking about being mindful and intentional. Say, I'm going to leave my phone in the house, or I'm going to leave it in the car, or I'm going to, and see how you do. But even if you're not addicted, I still think it is a good idea to have set times when you are not plugged in, because like I said, it's very exhausting for our brains and it's really just not good for us.
I need to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about electronic detoxing if you have an issue regarding unplugging. How do you do that slowly, surely, and maybe it's not just this weekend. Maybe it's once a month. We'll talk about it. 202-319-7810, 202-319-7810. We're talking about the National Day of Unplugging. We'll be back in just a moment.
There are a ton of social networking websites.
41, I'm Harold Fisher. We are talking about unplugging your technology, begging off from social media for a few hours or even a day. Tomorrow is the National Day of Unplugging, and an opportunity to reconnect with the human race. Miko, before the break, Dr. Cutts was talking about detoxing if there is the feeling that there is an addiction to technology. Now, short of an addiction, what do you suggest if you may not have a problem but realize that you do need to take a break? What do you suggest?
I agree with Dr. Cutter in terms of sort of setting boundaries and scheduling time away from your devices. And so, as I mentioned, I was sort of joking with you earlier, but we all have to sleep and we all have to eat. And so the time that we're eating lunch, for example, or spending time with our family eating dinner, those are really good opportunities for us to say, you know what, I'm going to put down my device, I'm going to put down my tablet, I'm going to be focused on, eating and being with the folks that I'm with. The same thing before bed. If you can say, okay, 20 minutes before bed, I'm going to shut off everything and I'm going to just focus on getting my mind right for the next day. Same thing in the morning. I'm going to give myself at least 20 minutes. Let me sort of just get my coffee or get my tea and sort of just get my bearings before I grab my phone. And to that point, if it's really a struggle, think about actually getting a real alarm clock. I know some folks haven't seen one of those in a while, but they still sell those. Go get you a real alarm clock and plug in your phone and your tablet outside of your bedroom so that you're not tempted and you're not distracted and your sleep is not disrupted by your device.
Mm-hmm. And I would imagine you spoke earlier about dealing with notifications, because a lot of people, for example, if they like to read, they're reading on their devices and not so much having a book in hand. And so I would imagine you need to make some adjustments.
Yes. And so the biggest thing here is to recognize that we have the power to change the default settings on the application. So a lot of them are set by default to push information to us, right? This is the incentive for app developers and companies that are making devices to actually keep us glued to our screen time. But that being said, we can change the settings to decide when and how we want to actually receive the information. So that part we do have control over.
How do you get businesses, particularly management, to have downtime? Because the business of business is very, very intense when you're talking about this modern era.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I get people to understand that you really can't afford not to take downtime. Ultimately, your employees are going to be happier. They're going to be more productive if they're actually able to have time away, time to decompress, not being constantly on. As Dr. Cutts was saying, physiologically and biologically, we actually need time to rest and to rejuvenate and to recharge. And what happens if we're sort of going, we burn out. And if we burn out, then a couple of things happen in terms of the business case. We lose productivity, so we're not as effective in advancing the mission of the organization. And you impact morale, right? So people will sort of run down and people begin to question, okay, well, is this the kind of organization that I want to work with? And is this something I want to actually do for the long term? And so businesses ultimately understand that it's in their best interest to give folks a break, to find a way to shape whatever their version of work-life balance actually looks like, so that the company gets what they need, but they're also caring for and actually nurturing the lives of their employees outside of their work life.
One of the things that Nettie also kind of touched on is that because of the very nature of our devices, that there were certain skills that young people do not have or do not do well overall, and that has to do with writing and speaking and communicating, because they're so used to texting and the like. Do you think that those foundational communication skills are casualties of the modern world and the modern devices?
They can be. And one of the things that I think about a lot as I think about having children is, teaching the difference between switching between different modalities, right? So it's okay that you talk a certain way, for example, if you're texting or if you're communicating with someone over social media. But if you're writing a formal cover letter for a job that you're applying to, or you're writing an essay for school, then that's a different approach, right? And so I think when it comes to education, we have to be able to help people to understand that it's not an either or. It's about understanding what's appropriate in which context.
Mm-hmm. I remember when I was a college adjunct professor and I was looking at papers that I had assigned students. In some cases, as you saw, some students had, really great command of the English language and grammar and composition and the like. But then there were some students that literally wrote as if they were texting. And I found that to be shocking. I really found it disturbing.
And that's a prime learning opportunity. I don't know that. I sort of came of age at a time where this was the cell phones becoming more and more popular, but they hadn't sort of taken over the way they have now. But I don't know that in any of my education that there was an explicit conversation, in an English class or composition class about, okay, well, these are the different ways that you write for technology platforms versus formal writing. And I feel like that's an easy, fix. I'm not an educator, but I feel like something as simple as saying, there's nothing wrong with the way that you're communicating. It's just not appropriate for this particular context. Here is what we're looking for in this context.
Mm-hmm. And some people would argue, and this may be, another kind of conversation, but as we very well noted over the past handful of years, there have been some school systems for elementary education that are no longer teaching cursive handwriting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're only teaching young children how to print. I would argue that is also, part of technology, because why teach cursive if writing by hand, letters and the like, is not as commonplace as it was 20, 30, or 50 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, I think it warrants a longer conversation. Like, again, I was, as we were talking about earlier, like, this is not an absolutist thing, right? We're not saying technology for everything. We're talking about finding the appropriate balance. So when we talk about education, and in your case, talking about the cursive writing, I think folks who are developing curriculum have to really begin to think about, okay, what's the balance here? And ultimately, what kind of students are we looking to produce when they go out into the world? And what skills do they actually need in order to be effective, not only in building their own business or applying for a job if they want to work for an organization, but also just being a productive citizen and being able to participate fully in society. So what are those skills? And I think we need to have that discussion.
And the other piece, because this isn't a technology bashing conversation, because there are great uses for technology. You spoke about the world being smaller, particularly when you're talking about connecting with relatives that are far away.
Exactly. So, and that's one of the beautiful things about Facebook, about, some of the technologies like WhatsApp and Skype that allow people at, low costs to really be able to access people from anywhere in the world. One of the things talking about reconnecting, I make a commitment to talk to my mom at least once a week. And generally it's on Sundays because I don't live in the same area that she does. And so what's amazing about the technology is that no matter where I am in the world, I can do that. And I don't need access to my home network for Verizon or for AT&T. I can use Skype. I can use Google Voice. There's so many other platforms that I can use. And I can call her and I can talk to her just as if I'm talking to her right now from my phone, just like I'm talking to you. And so it's really about how we're using the technology and what are the things we're prioritizing in terms of going back to what I was saying about our legacy. What kind of life do we want to live? Like, what do we want that quality of life to look like? And how can our cell phones, how can our tablets and other things facilitate that kind of life?
And you make a great point to kind of wrap up this conversation because, again, people of a certain age, if you wanted to talk to your mother who did not live in the same area, you had to use long distance. And it was always ridiculously expensive. And I can remember as a kid, if you want to talk to a relative who was in another state, after about 3 minutes or so, your parents would say, okay, that's long distance. It's costing. You don't have that kind of worry anymore. So I think that it's not even so much just a work-life balance, but in some cases it can be a financial balance. It can be an emotional balance. And I think overall, as you suggest, a good way to understand how technology can benefit without having it overtake us.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, there it is. The National Day of Unplugging, nationalunpluggingday.com. Just if you decide to participate, make sure that you tell your spouse or your significant other that you're doing that.
Yes, it's one of the keys. Let your important people know that you're going off the grid and what they can expect, so people are not like reporting you to the police saying you're missing.
Exactly. You unplug for 2 days, and then the cops will be knocking on your door with a welfare check, trying to figure out, are you okay? And and we may joke about that, but that's the reality.
Yes,
that is a reality. You unplug, and folks are going to start looking for you. I want to thank Miko Marquette Whitlock of Mindful Techie. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And of course, we want to thank also Dr. Nicole Cutts for joining us again, the clinical psychologist. That is the Daily Drum on Sirius XM Channel 141 for this Thursday, March 8th. I'm Harold Fisher. Tweet us using the hashtag WHURFM. And hey, why not? You can send me a letter too. I'll read it. Now stay tuned for The Connection with Lorna Newton. Good night.
The Howard University Radio